Praise the Lord, guys. I'm Straw Greenhorn. For a friend of mine in his journey is come unto me, and I have nothing to set before him. And he that is within shall answer and say, Trouble me not, for the door is now shut, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot rise and give unto thee. I say unto you, though he shall not rise and give unto him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity he shall rise and give unto him as many as he shall need. For to him that asketh it shall be given, he that seeketh shall find, and to him that knocketh the door shall be opened unto him. For I say of you, everyone that asketh receiveth, he that seeketh findeth, and to him that knocketh the door shall be opened. So here we have a continuation of the story that we ended with the beginning of last video. How, he was alone praying pretty much, and the disciples, one of them came unto him saying, Master, teach us how to pray. And then, Jesus, he gave him the Our Father who art in heaven prayer. We know that that's a famous prayer that, many people can recite. This is one of those things, it's right next to the Lord is my shepherd. So we saw how this man, he, is a follow-up to give visual to them asking how to pray. How we see this man, coming onto his friend, asking for some loaves. And then now we see it revealed here, because, he has none. And, understanding that they were, when, this is tied to them, asking, teach us how to pray, right? And I always said, just like the last time, how in their mind, they might have been reaching for something out of this world, something complicated, some complex combination of words that you have to say, like a combination to a lock or a safe, and they wanted to see the inside. But this is giving visual to what I was saying in the last video, how they're coming onto him, seeing it as such a hard thing, such a complex thing, right? Seeing what it's gonna take. What's the great mystery? Because he's always praying, right? And them going through their minds, would be wondering, what is he saying, this whole time? Yeah, this is the Son of God. What is he saying? So now this story is gonna add, visual, how it's gonna show how this man, how the neighbor, he felt it to be even more than his duty than the man that's receiving his friend. The neighbor, he saw it more of a duty to himself to do this than even the man that had the friend come unto him, showing unto us, how God, is happy to hear from us, and happy to interact, to hear our concerns, what's on our heart. So the overall picture is that this story now is gonna add meaning to what he's trying to show them. Now I brought down the structure of this prayer in the last video, right? So now here is the parable. We see this man having a friend come onto him. Now this obviously is a friend enough for him to want to not just let things fall to the ground, not just have him come and sit there, but he wanted to be a good host. So this friend is a friend that has some impact, right? We all have different kind of friends, right? We have the ones that we'll go all out for. We have the ones that are just regular. We have acquaintances. We have people that we only interact with them as on a bare minimum necessity. But throughout life, we meet people, and we form different bonds and emotional connections to people. And we assign people different meanings. We assign people different values, right? So, we understand that this is the kind where he wants to impress him, It's not said how long he knew him. Was he a childhood friend, Did he meet him like at a Passover? They always went up to Jerusalem each year. And, the festivities of that can already set the tone for that kind of lively interaction, that kind of, well, we want to maintain, you see, as high as this feast was, we want to maintain that same emotion, all the time. Because, we met this person in that, and I think that the emotion in which you meet people, right, and in which you interact with them, for a majority of the time, it's gonna set the stage for what kind of interactions you have with them, what kind of quality in interaction. So, we know that this person, they are of a good, emotional, connection, experience. There's something going on there. No doubt, like I said, it could have been somebody that they knew from a long time, that also has, carries weight. Or they met this person at a certain place. So, not much is given about the relationship, how they know each other and in what, underlying meaning, what theme, the relationship was. But, this describes him as a friend of mine. So, did he come to see this man, or was he passing through to go somewhere else, right? If he was on a journey, going somewhere far, and he took this route, killed two birds with one stone. I get to see my friend, as well as, I get a place to stay for the night, without maybe having to spend. Because, as we see, this man, he's about to take it upon himself to take care of this person, right? He's setting food before him. No doubt he's going to find him a bed to sleep in. He's going to have water to wash, everything, that he needs. So, did he come specifically to see him? And, he describes it, a friend in his journey. So that would allude to us that he's passing through and he stopped by, because in his journey, he's come unto me. It makes it seem more that he was not the destination, but he's just stopping by to see his friend on the way. And how he's so mindful to present something before him. Jesus, he just got done with the whole thing about the good Samaritan. And I brought down that in that video how how people will treat those above them with such good things, but then those below them with such bad things, right? How they'll highly esteem those above them and then look down on those below them. So this man, he was in whatever stands in his mind worthy of this. So he was concerned about having something to set before him. We all have different kind of friends, like I was saying. You might have that friend who's always wanting to borrow money. How are you gonna treat him when he comes to your house? Maybe not so good, maybe not so well, right? Versus a person that's of a higher ranking. They have a lot going on in their lives that's of a high quality, and you are striving and hoping to be a part of that. And I think that that's what's coming through here in this story. How this man, he's trying to maintain a high quality experience for his friend. And then we say Jesus being giving them in theory a theoretical answer. How do you think that this man is now going to, well, he said, trouble me not, right? He's going to be upset or offended. How dare you come unto me this late? Propriety, right? Procedure and protocol. It's too late for you to be knocking on my door. And by correct answer, that he has children, right? So my children are in bed with me, and the door is now shut, right? Understanding that this is inappropriate, and I can't look past this. And not only I can't, but this is probably going to put a strain on our relationship. Because now I'm going to remember that this day that you knocked on my door so late, and I'm going to look at you a certain ways. Right? What kind of person does this? What do you think is going on? What kind of thing are you trying to establish? So he gives hyperbole. This is the hyperbole, right? When you over exaggerate in one direction, either for or against something, just to prove a more consistent point, is to give you a range, right? So that you can calibrate and understand what is going on more in front of you. How he used story as an extreme for you to realize how ridiculous this thing is, so that you would be more comfortable, and you would be more willing to accept and not see it as anything out of the way. But it's even done in a way to reassure you, right? So a friend of mine, is coming to me in his journey, right? And I have nothing to set before him. So, will he then be upset, and point out all these things that, you know, the time is now past, trouble me not, right? Trouble me not. This doesn't sound like a good working relationship, right? Since somebody is telling you to trouble them not, you don't, in this instance, you're asking for something that you don't have, the weight or the credit, and you haven't established, enough, to be asking for this thing. Trouble me not, right? My children are in bed, the door is not shut, I cannot rise, right? Giving this answer, but then, how then he gives you a kind of, verily I say unto you that, he's not going to do it because it's his friend, but because of the importunity, letting this, make us understand that, a certain dynamic is coming into play right now. People take pride in themselves, people take pride in their standards. I think this now comes about as a matter of pride and standard. I point it back to the original question. He's showing them to show the pride and standard of God. While you're there worried about all these things, look at the pride of God. Look at the standard of God. Just as with this man. So he's gonna do it because word, and especially in those days, that they lived as a community, right? Anything that happened socially, it was publicized throughout the whole region. That's really how Jesus got his ministry spread. He healed one, they went and told everybody. Now everybody's coming. Now when they get healed, and not only healed, they hear his words. Now they come and tell more people. And before you know it, the country round about. Bible says that his fame went throughout every part of the country round about. Because of something like this. So now, he can't afford for this is more on his name, right? Can you imagine, I didn't have anything to set before him. And this person, they don't have to tell it in a bad light, right? I didn't have anything to set before my guests. And the only person I could ask was whatsoever, but he didn't have any, right? Now his name, is associated with that. This reminds me of, there's a custom in old Israel where it's the same thing that the Sadducees came with that parable. If a man's brother die, leaving the wife behind with no children, that the brother is supposed to raise up seed. So if the brother now does not want to take the wife and give his brother a child in his name, right? There's a custom where they would loose the shoe off the man, and then now everybody would know that this is he who had his shoe loose, and it was considered a great shame, right? So it's kind of the same thing because at this point it's on me now. I'm gonna be the one who you came to and you did not. You came to me for bread, and I could not provide. And especially in those days, men, they had, all they had was their word and their honor, and provision. Substance was a man, right? If you don't have, to spare, then what's going on inside? And that's another question. What's going on inside your house? How comes you didn't have any to spare? So at this point, it becomes about me. Them asking how to pray unto God. At this point, it becomes about Him, right? So that we see, the famous, sayings, the famous parable about, seeking, finding, knock, it shall be open. Asking to receive. You know, this is meant to, highlight the simplicity of God, really, and how God, how active He is in the world and in our life. Bible says the eyes of the Lord, run to and fro throughout the entire earth, to show Himself strong in the behalf of those whose heart is perfect towards Him. Purposely seeking to show Himself strong on our behalf. So then, if somebody is purposely seeking to show themselves strong on your behalf, right? Then, if you look at these questions, right? To him that asks, it shall be given. If he's, seeking to show himself strong on your behalf, when you ask, you shall receive. So, we see, an effort on our end, right? We see a process on our end. We see a state of mind on our end. There is something that we do, and we have to contrast this to what Paul said, right? That you have not because you ask not, but then you receive not because you ask amiss that you might consume it upon your lust. Asking for things for the wrong reason. Asking for things to show off, asking for things to abuse them. Asking for things because of stereotypes. Not having a genuine heart. Not the thing that you're asking for, you're probably gonna have to do some service onto it, right? You're gonna have to serve that thing. Asking amiss is asking not from the point of you servicing that thing. Asking for children, right? Servicing them, bringing them up. With a good upbringing in the fear of the Lord. Raising them to be honorable. Asking for a spouse. Willing to supply their needs and wants. And to be a protector and a provider. To lift this person up and keep them in a good place. Asking amiss for something. The greatest answer I can give is that you're asking, but you're not gonna be willing to be of service to this thing. Whatever you're asking for a business, are you gonna be of service to it? And then use it for good things. Are you gonna be selfish? Are you gonna be a mean boss? You're gonna be unreasonable. You're gonna offer people bad deals. Being of service to the whatever thing that you're asking for. Being of service to that thing. A lot of people want wealth, but then they want to just buy yachts and helicopters. And bedroom houses and $5 million cars, right? Not willing to be of service with this money. Fixing the problems in the world, poverty, homelessness, the abused, the less fortunate, displaced people. So, ask and you shall receive. We see a desire within the person making this, stated, to seek and you shall find, right? Now, you understand that, you start without that thing, but your goal is to get it. And, you do the best that you can, asking for God's help also. But, using common sense, what does it take to get this thing? If you want corn, you can't plant, rice. So, seeking and you shall find, the thing that you're looking for. There's going to be, certain things that are absolutely contradictory to this thing. And even common sense, because if you can't start with that, you're starting from such a bad place. But, you can only start where you are, right? And, course correct as you go. Knock and the door shall be opened unto you. Understanding that when you knock, you present yourself as the best. It's like when you go for a job interview, right? How you have to dress presentable. Yeah, your resume must be good. You must display confidence and calmness. Answer the questions, intelligently. Show your ability to problem solve and, adapt to whatever they're asking you. To knock for something, it's understanding that when you knock, the door is going to be open. And you see, when that door opens, if it sees you looking like a clown, it's going to just close right back. Knocking, the door is going to open and then it's going to look at you. And if you look like a clown, the door is just going to close right back. Are you going to find some way to destroy this thing? All right, so here we are in the early parts of the 11th chapter of Luke, where it started out saying, and it came to pass as he was in a certain place praying, when he ceased, one of the disciples came unto him, saying, Master, teach us how to pray, even as John taught his disciples how to pray. And Jesus answered and said unto him, when ye pray, say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. that will be done as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So then he said unto them, which of you, having a friend, shall go unto this friend at midnight and say, friend, lend me 3 loaves. So we pick up right here, where it says, for a friend of mine, his journey come unto me, and I have nothing to set before him. So, this is a theoretical story that Jesus is presenting unto them, which is, used to over exaggerate so that you get, it's designed you at ease, right? About something, showing that, showing to you your very self. If I was to take on this mindset of this over exaggerated thing, then, me looking at it, and I think that sometimes it's easier for us to see things in others than to see things in ourselves. So he uses this example to show, all right, no, you see how super exaggerated this is, right? Now, how ridiculous is that? Now, look, you're doing the same thing, right? That's kind of the effect. I say it's easier to see things in others than in ourselves, right? He just gave them that parable of why behold is the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but not the beam that is in thy own eye. First cast the beam out of your own eye. It's the reason why people, they can give others better advice than they give themselves. I don't know. I think that, when we're called upon, how we can put ourselves, in a theoretical place, and we can stand and reason so well from that place, But I don't know. I just think it's a human phenomenon. How we are able, I think it's blind spots, it's self-defense. A lot of these processes, they are unconscious and subconscious, right? And that's where, self-development comes in. These books and this knowledge is designed to open your eyes to certain things that are happening inside you. They're happening the whole time, and you might look at them your whole life and never know what they mean. So now, having these tools, now you can go in as your own surgeon. You can go in as your own psychiatrist, and you can deal with your own issues, right? And, with all the care and patience that you need to move at the rate that, you are comfortable with. So, he started out this parable about this man going to his friend, knocking, asking for 3 loaves. In those days, bread was the main thing. Bread and water, wine, grapes, raisins, corn, oil, cakes, pigs, right? Bread being the main thing. He fed them with what? The fishes and the loaves, right? So, for whatever reason, he did not have any. If he's, this man, he has children, right? Maybe you caught him at a bad time. Maybe you didn't catch him when the wife just got done baking the whole batch, but you caught him when it was about to be done and it was time to bake some more. So he goes and knocks on his neighbor's door, letting him know what's going on. And he's explaining the situation that a friend of mine in his journey, so, like I said, a friend, right? And, based on what he's, the lengths he's, willing to go for this man, this is a good, this is somebody who he, at least is trying to maintain a certain, standard, of just, care, a certain standard of experience, how he doesn't want to, bring this man into his house and then, no food, maybe, where is he going to sleep? We don't have a place for him to sleep, no place to wash. What's going on in this house, right? Was it Paul that said, that the man of God, he must know how to rule his own house well, right? And have, certain things in order. In those days, these standards, they were so much more emphasized, even it is today. So, we know that this is a friend of a high quality. And, in his journey is come unto me. So in his journey, right, this makes you feel like this was not the destination, but, rather, a pit stop, rather, a stop to rest for the night and then maybe travel. But, I could be wrong. It could, very well be that he came to see his friend. So, we're not told how far he's coming from. We're not told how long they've been friends for. We're not told, how they are friends. Were they childhood friends? Did he meet him, like I said, like at a Passover at Jerusalem? Was he a family friend? Somebody he did business with, and they just hit it off and now they have this kind of relationship. So he's come on to me and I have nothing to set before him. So we understand that he chose to come here. He could have gone other places. So now the fact that he chose to come here means that, he must respect you to a certain level. And I think that that's what he fears losing is this respect, For, this man, whenever his name is brought up, to have, something negative to say about him, and his experience. So, we see him here, it's late in the night. So he didn't ask the wife to go and bake a cake like what Abraham did when the angels came unto him, right? This man, he's come unto me and I have nothing to set before him. So my reputation is on the line. Next time he might go somewhere else. I think that, rejection is hard for us as people, right? If this man would have just gone somewhere else, without coming to him, it would have been maybe not such a big deal. But you see, if he was to come onto him and then have a bad experience, and then next time you hear he's in town and he did not come to you, Now you know that he chose, to not come to you as opposed to, just by chance preferring to go to like, a hotel or an inn as they had in those days. So, his, reputation is on the line right now. All right, so the next verse says, and he that is within shall answer and say, trouble me not, the door is now shut and my children are in bed with me. Cannot rise and give unto thee. So, like I said, this is a hyperbole, it's an exaggeration, something that we know that we could never get to. And just by, pointing it out to somebody, you could, show them just how, unreasonable they are being and whatever, they are thinking about. So he does it is within. So, he's in his own house, in his own safety. And, whatever he's got going on in there, he is not willing to share it. You're not of, like I said, that, relationship. I think that sometimes with certain people we try or we get this in our mind, that we're closer than we really actually are. And then, lo and behold, one day something happens and, it is demonstrated. You might even get rebuked, right? For assuming that you and this person are of that kind of relationship, how shameful would it be, right, for this man? If, first of all, this guy came onto him and he had nothing to say before him, then he goes next door and he gets rebuked, right? That would be a hard day for this man, right? I mean, he would wear that on his spirit, and every interaction, speaking with this man, it would come through that something, is wrong or that something happened, something, not so good. So he that is within, we see him here keeping these doors closed, right? Just this he that is within. It's kind of like a every man for himself. It's kind of like a cold, maybe not so neighborly vibe. He that is within means that you are without, right? We know how people that are exclusive to a certain thing, how they'll exclude others and even mock them, and jeer them, right? And taunt, right? He's like, I have everything in here I need. You don't, what is that my problem, right? He that is within shall answer and say, trouble me not, right? But this is such a impersonal answer. Yeah, this shows that, hey, you're crossing the line and you're thinking that this is okay, but it's not. I said, we hate to be rebuked. We hate and we'll, assume that we're friends with people, especially of a higher, ranking. Because I guarantee you, the friend that was always looking to borrow money, he would never have gone to his door and knock on his door asking for anything. This person, is high enough that, he could, in times of need, our minds, we immediately snap and go to the people that we know are capable. So this man, he is capable, right? So that means, and with capable people like this, you're gonna want their allegiance, right? You're gonna want their alliance. So now if this man is rebuking you, saying "trouble me not," right? That shows that you don't have the kind of rapport with this person that you think you have in your mind. Trouble me not. This is, kind of like saying, we're not that close. I don't know where you think you get this idea. You can come unto me like this. Trouble me not. For the door is now shut and my children are in bed with me. So now you are, stepping the line. And now I'm going to have something to say to people tomorrow. Tell them how you came to my door, so late. And now your name is going to be out there like that. Do you not, know common sense and self-respect, propriety, decency and order? You think this is just like some free for all. The door is now shut. You know that it's inappropriate for you to be coming onto me at this time, right? For the door is now shut. So, he's not, answering. I mean, he already said trouble me not, right? But now he's using that the fact that the door is shut and it's out of my hands because it's up to the door and that is shut, right? And you're not worth, and I think you're not worth it for me to reverse this. The door is now shut and you're not worth, for me to open it back. My children are in bed with me. I put them to sleep and, they are my concern right now. I cannot rise and give unto you. All right, so the next verse says, I say unto you, though he shall not rise and give unto him, because he is his friend, yet because of his importunity, he shall give unto him as many as he shall need. So this becomes a thing about honor now, right? That's what we're seeing. It's not so much that it's his friend, but now that his name is on the line. You came to me, I know my name is on the line. I think we can reason from both sides how each one of these two men, they're afraid to disappoint the other, and they are afraid to be disappointed by the other. These two men, they are equally afraid to disappoint the other and to be disappointed, by each other. So the fact that you're his friend, that got you in the door, but it's not about that anymore. It's kind of like, city pride, right? How, you can expect certain things from a certain city, from a certain country. This is their pride. They can brag about these things, that this is what goes on in our city or country. And we can tell this to the world. This is about this kind of pride, right? It's, nobody's going to come through here and, get that kind of experience. Because what does that say about us? This more becomes about us than you now. Like I said, answering the question that they were asking, God Himself, how do we pray? Thinking that, it's them really when, just like this right now, it becomes a pride thing, for God. Shall it be said that this happened, and I was on watch? So though he shall not rise again unto him because he is his friend, but because of his importunity. So, importunity is kind of like a mixture of two words, right? Opportunity and like, intruding, like imposing, upon. So, he came and he, imposed upon him, which also gave him an opportunity because now his name is going to be mentioned, how he came through. So now his name is on the line. And these men, they were men of honor in those days, right? Especially. So this, it becomes a pride thing, a manly pride kind of thing. How dare you think you can come around here and, certain things happen. And it's just really the essence of a man, right? Standard that can be expected, to provide, take care of one's own, protect and defend. You know that, as long as I'm around, you're not gonna be faced with certain dangers, as long as you have me. How protect you. We have each other's back. We protect and we survive everything together. So this is more like a camaraderie. Honor before anything else. This is honor before anything else. So because of this situation of honor, he's gonna give him as many as he shall need. And when it's done, then he shall have rest. When the situation is satisfied, then he shall have rest. But until then, it's his duty, it's his task, see this thing, through to the end. So the next verse says, for to him that asketh, unto him it shall be given. He that seeketh shall find. Unto him that knock, the door shall be opened. So, like I said, comparing it to the complex answer that they were looking for. You have to say only these specific words, and you have to say them in the exact order. You have to say them at the exact, rate of speed. Not too fast, not too slow. You have to say them in this exact voice. You have to wear this exact facial expression. The Bible says, he says, behold, I come quick, and my reward is with me, to give unto each man according to as he had done, whether it be good or bad. So, if God, understanding with this, that God, He's the kind that, He walks around with this reward. I think that, for you to, better digest this, you understand that God, He walks around with these rewards, right? Like Santa Claus, at Christmas time with his huge bag that he has gifts for everyone. So unto him that asks, it shall be given. So, making your request made known. I forget the scripture that says this very thing. Make your request made known unto him. Because, if it's not a yes, then it's a not yet. And if it's a not yet, why? Are you in position? Are you ready to service? As I said earlier, are you looking at it with the wrong mind? Are you looking at how it, will make you look to other people? That's the only reason that you care to get it. And not that, you are in such a genuine place. You are in such a mature place where, you can multiply. And that's the next thing, where you can multiply this thing and increase it and, give it back. If God were to ask for it back, you would give it back in a better condition than which He gave it to you. So ask, to him that asks, it shall be given. Seek and you shall find. So now we know seek is, ask is just, whether verbally or not, just desiring the thing and requesting this thing. But seek is more, steps to seeking than to ask. Seeking, we see, plotting, right? Calculating, doing certain, steps and procedures, calling certain things into play, establishing, as opposed to just, wanting and asking for the thing, even non-verbally. To seek is to go after it. And if you miss it, then, you try again. You reposition, you recalculate, you reorient, you redirect, and it's more a long-term thing to seek something, right? So to seek and you shall find. Because, anything in life that's worth anything is not going to be easy to obtain. Anything that's easy to obtain, is not that valuable. And that's just how it is. Resources, like, the rarer something is, the more value it is of. And it's not according to what you think it should be, but according to what it is. Because, one valuable resource in one place might not be valuable in another place, right? Mangoes, I'm from Jamaica, right? In Jamaica, mangoes, they're so cheap. You come to America, they're so expensive. Can they grow mangoes in America? The value of a thing in one place. They always like to use the water bottle, right? Bottle of water. How in the supermarket it's $1. You go to the movie theater, it's $5. You go on the airline, it's $10, right? For the same bottle of water. So to seek, the more valuable the thing is, then prepare to put more time in. Knock and the door shall be open. Now seeking is, I would say, similar to knocking. But knocking implies, more, I would say, more of a final thing about that thing. With knocking, you're more bold. Knocking, I believe, is what comes after seeking, right? After you've sought the thing, you went through your lessons, you've tried and failed and got back up. To knock is when you have the final picture. Because, what we think a thing is when we start out is a lot of the times wrong. And after going after that thing for so long, then you see the true steps behind it. You see what's really going on in the background. You see what it is really made up of, and not some preconceived notion, not some projection, not some stereotype, not some what other people think it is, but you see it for yourself. So no, when you have this final picture, now you can knock. That's when you knock. And then this door, is opened. I know I used the example earlier. If it opens and it sees you as a clown, right? But after doing, after having, seek, sought, for this thing rightly, then it's hard for you to, be a clown when that door does open. But then, like I said, Paul, what did Paul say? You have not because you ask not, and you receive not because you ask amiss, that you might consume it upon your lust. Asking for things for the wrong reason. And I use the example about servicing, how, be willing to service that thing, right? Multiplying it, increasing what it is, making it better. If God were to ask you back for it, you should give it back to him in a better condition than he gave it to you. I'm Straw Greenhorn.